in half.
God, no, how? It was good just a second ago.
I think we're live.
Are we live?
Hi.
Oh, yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having us. We are Kyle and Rania. We are recruiters for a leading staffing solution provider called Darwin Recruitment. As a company, we have over 20 years of experience in the industry. Darwin has established itself as a global organization with offices in 6 countries: the UK, Netherlands, Germany, Switzerland, Sweden, and even the USA. We also have around 300 freelancers deployed all over the world, with around 150 freelancers from our Netherlands office.
Yeah, and we also specialize in the fields of cloud, data, digital, engineering, project management, networking and security, and offer a wide range of services, including permanent, contracting, temp to perm, employed leasing, and payrolling. So that's kind of like an introduction about Darwin. And of course, I also want to introduce you guys that we have Abby and Victoria from IAMEXPAT. So Abby and Victoria, can you tell us a little bit more about IAMEXPAT, please?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria. I work as an editor at IAMEXPAT, and I am based in Amsterdam. I was born and raised here, so very familiar with the Dutch way of life and the Dutch culture and the Dutch work culture. I've been at IAMEXPAT Media for a couple of years now, and IAMEXPAT was founded back in 2009, so we've been around for a while in the Netherlands. And the premise is that it's an English language platform that provides information and news for internationals living in the Netherlands. But since then, we've also expanded into Germany and Switzerland. So we're operating on quite a wide platform and helping quite a lot of internationals across Europe. What's great about IAMEXPAT is it's expat founded and expat led. So the team together, we all have quite a lot of experience in living abroad and having to relocate and living in foreign countries. And so, yeah, like I've mentioned, IAMEXPAT, we have news, information, up-to-date, things like that. But as well, we also have job listings and housing boards, housing services, and loads of other listings that include expat-focused services.
Mm-hmm. We also run a fair twice a year in the Netherlands, which we're going to tell you a bit more about at the end of this. But we have one coming up in Amsterdam at the end of April. So I'll just introduce myself quickly as well. My name's Abby. I'm a managing editor at IAMEXPAT, and I have lived in the Netherlands for a while and moved abroad in a few different places and worked both as a freelancer and an employee previously. So I have a bit of experience on both of those sides of the sort of spectrum, yeah. So we're really excited to join today. Yeah. That's it.
We asked all of our attendees to register with information about what they want to learn for this event. And we hope to cover over all these topics: finding jobs, networking, language requirements, remote working, salary benchmarks, cost of living, visas, tech registration as a freelancer. Lots to cover. There are also more than 250 attendees, so you can imagine that there were a lot of questions about this. But we'll start with the more generic questions and then get more focused a bit later on. Wahele from Australia would like to understand the rules and regulations around freelancing in the Netherlands. I understand that this is a very broad topic, but Abby and Victoria, do you have a list of the main rules around freelancing in the Netherlands?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll take this one. You've said it. It's a very broad topic, and a lot of the issues we're going to be covering throughout the course of this webinar in the form of answers to other questions. But starting with the very, very key basics here, the first step, I think as many people will know, especially if they're coming from outside of the EU, is that you need to make sure you have the right work permits and residence permits. Obviously, we're focusing in freelancing. So I guess in most cases, for a lot of people, that residence permit would be the residence permit for self-employed people. These are all outlined, all of the requirements for this specific residence permit and all of the others that are available for the Netherlands outlined on the IND website. But just to give you a quick overview, you would have to meet the general entry requirements for other visas and permits as well. So making sure you have a valid passport and also making sure that there aren't any issues with your criminal record and you don't pose a danger to society, shall we say. Also on top of that, something that's more specific for freelancers, we have to make sure that your business and your business plan is of essential interest to the Dutch economy. So this is quite a vague term, but the idea is that it's worked out via a point system that is calculated by the IND, and you are able to acquire points based on your personal experience, your business plan, and the value that you add to the Netherlands. But yeah, as I said, it's all very points and it's very specific to your certain case and what you're able to bring. Other things that you'll need to take care of are making sure that you're registered with the Dutch Chamber of Commerce, which is known in Dutch as the Kamer van Koophandel or the KVK, KVK. We'll mention it repeatedly throughout this webinar, so just so you know. Other things that you need to make sure you do, you need to meet the income requirements. So there's like a minimum monthly pre-tax monthly profit that you need to be able to make as a freelancer. And this needs to be evident in your business plan. And finally, as a freelancer, clues kind of in the name, you need to have a commission that is in the Netherlands, and you need to have that before you're able to acquire a residence permit. So basic rules, key rules, first steps.
And the next question for Varun, who's already in the Netherlands, would like to understand the pros and cons of freelancing in the Netherlands versus other nearby countries. Abby and Victoria, can you help with this?
Yeah, I can talk about this a little bit. Obviously, if you're already in the Netherlands, you must know a bit about life in the Netherlands. But let's imagine that to help everyone. I think some of the biggest pros about working in the Netherlands is the fact that you have a pool of English-speaking clients in the Netherlands. So English is like a very commonly used business language across the Netherlands compared to some countries like Germany. There's a lot of websites and businesses that will be making stuff online in English and providing services in English. So if English is a language that you feel comfortable working in, the Netherlands is a very good place to look for work. I would also say that the kind of paperwork setup process of like registering your freelance business in the Netherlands, it's relatively complicated, but it's not as complicated as you might find elsewhere. And so that kind of removes some of the barriers towards actually starting up your business. I think there's a really obviously strong economy in the Netherlands, and a lot of you're able to command quite high day rates as you're aware of your value, compared to some other countries in the European Union, especially, you can earn quite a bit of money as a freelancer in the Netherlands. It's a country that values workers and values skill sets quite highly. And then kind of more broadly, if we're talking about the Netherlands, you could talk about the central location within Europe. So in terms of traveling, if that's something you're interested in, but also potentially gaining commissions in other countries within Europe nearby to be able to sort of like access a broader pool of clients, that kind of centralized location in Europe is great. And the Netherlands is just a lovely place to live. It has a very high quality of life. And that is a big pro if you're looking towards somewhere to move to. A few cons I might mention is the tax rates. So we'll talk about freelance taxes in a bit more detail later in the webinar. But broadly speaking, you pay as a freelancer the income tax and VAT. And these rates might be a little bit higher than you are used to in your home country, and also potentially in other European countries like Switzerland. The tax band starts at around 30% and can rise to 37% and more, depending on how much you earn. I think that the requirements for applying for a permit as a freelancer, so like a visa to come to the country, is a little bit more demanding in the Netherlands than elsewhere. They don't have these, like, you know, some countries have got special permits for digital nomads and things like that. That kind of situation doesn't really exist in the Netherlands yet. So you will face quite stringent requirements if you're coming from outside of the European Union. And the final kind of con I would mention is that it can require some knowledge of Dutch in the registration process of your business. We'll talk about this again in a second. So if you don't speak any Dutch and you don't have any kind of connections or friends that might be able to help you with the process, that could be a con, that you will have to have a little bit of Dutch. And with the sort of interactions with the tax office and authorities, again, there'll be some organizations that can help you that we will talk about in a bit, but this might be a con, that some Dutch will be required. Yeah.
Wajila would like to understand the boundaries around freelancing. What are the do's and don'ts? Abby and Victoria, can you help with this, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be entirely honest here. I'm not entirely sure what kind of boundaries are being referenced here. I don't know if you mean personal boundaries and like setting a boundary in your actual everyday like personal life, or professional boundaries as in what are the limits to freelancing in the Netherlands. So I'll try and cover a little bit of everything in this answer and hope that I'm hitting the nail on the head with at least a couple of these options. For starters, let's start positive. Let's start do's. Make sure you, as mentioned, previously, make sure you have some clients in the Netherlands so that you can actually get into the country, which is a very, very key aspect if you want to be a freelancer in the Netherlands. Another key aspect is making sure that you define those relationships with the clients. It's important that you have these contracts, and it's good business practice if you're setting out as a freelancer and maybe you've never done this before. So knowing where your limits are and what kind of relationships you want to be having with these clients is key, but also potentially even more importantly than that, it's required by law in the Netherlands. So you really want to make sure you're doing things properly, and it avoids any misunderstandings down the road when you've perhaps been working with someone for a long time and things are difficult, maybe. A very, very big issue that anyone who has any experience freelancing will know is that it's important that you know to value yourself and your time, and making sure that you know what kind of time you want to make available to acquiring new clients. How much work are you willing to do for free? Are you willing to do any for free at all? What is your hourly rate going to be? Remember that your hourly rate isn't just an hourly rate or an hourly wage. You're having to cover insurances, pension contributions, all of these kinds of things as well. So keep that in mind. Key tip. Finally, I guess, make sure that you have the advice. Well, in my opinion, make sure that you have the advice. So you have an accountant or a tax advisor that you can advise. It can help you save money on your tax returns. It can make sure that you're tax compliant and avoid any issues with the Dutch tax office, which can be quite a big issue for freelancers, especially if they don't speak any Dutch and they're not familiar with the system. So it might cost a little bit of money, but in the long term, it's probably worth it for most freelancers who are hoping to work in the Netherlands. On the other hand, some don'ts. I think this is a tip that probably a lot of freelancers or hopeful freelancers will know, is don't rely on one client for all of your income. Not only could it potentially put you in a tricky situation if that client is no longer interested in employing you, but it could also turn out that the Dutch tax office thinks that you are employed and that you have an employer and that you're not self-employed. So that could lead to issues with your social security contributions and potential issues with tax. So like we've said, make sure you have contracts and that they're discussed with the clients and that they're signed. These are generally known as model agreements that define your working relationship and what you can expect out of this contract and this negotiation. A piece of information here, some of these, you can find templates for these kinds of contracts on the Dutch tax office website, which is very useful if you're not sure where to start. And finally, keeping your personal and business accounts separate. So making sure you're not putting your business money into a personal bank account. Not only would this make things less confusing, but it can also make sure that you don't have any issues with where your streams of income are going and what they're being spent on. So you don't have any issues with tax expense, business expenses, or tax income returns, tax returns, things like that. So yeah, keep it separate.
And Rajila would like to understand the boundaries around. We already got that. I'm sorry. Parit from Kuala Lumpur would like to know about freelancing in the Netherlands with a work permit. Is this possible?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to answer this question is to sort of start with the absolute basics on what you need to come to the Netherlands, like in terms of residence permits and visas. It's a little bit complicated, so I'm going to try and break it down. So broadly speaking, as you would expect with freedom of movement across the bloc, if you are, have EU nationality or EEA or from Switzerland, then you are able to come to the Netherlands and work as a freelance just the same as you're able to have a job. There's no kind of restriction on that. If you're coming from outside the EU, it depends on whether you want to work purely in the self-employed capacity, or if you are going to work in a job and have freelance work on the side. So the Dutch government describes someone as being truly self-employed, which means that you're only doing self-employed work, is if you are your own boss, so you don't have a boss. You have multiple clients with contracts with them, and you only work as a self-employed capacity. So in this case, you need a special type of residence permit called the work permit for self-employed professionals. So we're going to post in the chat the link where you can call this information up as well. It's quite helpful because you can put in your nationality as well and how long you're planning to stay for the Netherlands, and it will provide you information on your situation. But generally speaking, if you want to come to the Netherlands to get a residence permit for self-employed capacity, you'll have to apply from outside the Netherlands for a provisional residence permit. This is kind of a visa that allows you to travel to the Netherlands. And then once you have arrived, you have to apply to the IND to get your full residence permit for self-employed activity. And you'll have to show proof of those things that Victoria mentioned earlier, like a business plan with your income expectations and the value that you're adding to the Dutch economy and things like that. So you'll need your passport and your bits and pieces like that. Once this is then issued, it allows you to work in a self-employed capacity, but it doesn't allow you to work as an employee for a company. If you want to do it the other way around, so say you want a job and you want to freelance on the side, you can do that on certain types of residence permits or work permits, but it will say specifically whether this is allowed by the IND. And again, you'll need to speak to your boss about it to make sure that it is permitted. So some work permits do allow you to work freelance on the side, but some of them don't. So you need to check your individual work permit. Also a different type of resident permit known as a startup visa, which some people might have heard of. We've got some information about this that we can share from the IAMEXPAT website, but we're not going to talk about it in today's webinar because it's like a whole big other topic. It's known as the startup visa, which is for entrepreneurs, but it's not really intended for freelancers. So if you're looking for a freelance visa, you would either have a work permit and work on the side, self-employed, or you would have the self-employed residence permit. I hope that answers your question.
And then Ashish from Sweden and Maus from England would like to find out about the cost of living in the Netherlands. We actually have a cost of living calculator on our website. We're going to put the link in the chat for you. Here you can compare city by city, and it will show the difference in rent, insurance, fuel, and even the cost of a burger or cinema tickets.
Well, so we're done with like the first part of the conversation. The topics, but we're gonna talk about more topics. So another topic is freelancing as a BV or like a limited company, and the other preparations. So in this section, we will discuss like more details about freelancing. There are like two different types. So this is gonna be about the BV, like about the limited company in terms, and the preparation in terms of accounting, finance, and stuff like that. So let's go to the first question, which is from Mehmet, who is already in the Netherlands. He would like to know the steps to freelancing as a BV in the Netherlands. And so Abby and Victoria, can you explain us what does this mean and how to do this basically?
I'll take this one. Go on. So when you start in the Netherlands, set up as a freelancer, what you're doing is essentially establishing your own business. When you set up a business, this is very basic, so some of you probably already know this, but I'm just going to make sure that we all know what we're talking about. When you're setting up a business, you have to choose a legal form, which governs a few different things about the way that your business is run and the money involved. For freelance businesses, the Netherlands doesn't have a set legal form, so you're essentially free to choose which kind of legal form you want and what type of business you want to set up. But most people will choose between two different types. So the most common one is what's known as an eenmanszaak, which is a sole trader or a one-person business. So I'm going to call it a sole trader to avoid me saying eenmanszaak so many times. I'm sorry. So I'm going to call it a sole trader. And the second type, which is another commonly used form, is a BV, which is a limited company, which is what the question was about. So we're a bit clear about the differences. With the sole trader, it's probably the most commonly used type of business form because it's the easiest to set up. You can do it yourself by going to the KVK and filling out a form essentially and having an interview. It's got a few different tax breaks. It's sort of aimed at small businesses, as you would guess. So people who set up small businesses like that can take advantage of a number of tax breaks in their first years. They get a lot of support from the government. But the biggest disadvantage of a sole trader or a one-person business is that you're personally liable for your business debts with all of your personal assets. So there's no separation between your business assets and your personal assets. And if you run up debts in your business, then you are like legally bound to pay them from your personal assets. So you could run into problems where you end up sort of losing your house or your car, or worst case scenario. So for that reason, bigger companies or companies that have investors or significant amount of capital invested in them might choose a different form, which is known as the BV, or a limited company. This is a bit more complicated to set up and comes with more requirements. So unlike some countries, the Netherlands doesn't require you to put in a minimum amount of capital for a BV. So you can set one up with as little as 1 cent. But the process itself is a little bit more complicated. So you have to enlist the help of a notary to help you set up your business. So that what they will do is fill out all of the forms for you, register your business, something called the Articles of Incorporation. So that sort of sets out things like shareholders and board of directors and things like that for bigger corporations. As a freelancer, you're most likely to be perhaps the sole shareholder and director, in which case you're called a DGA in the Netherlands. And the law provides that you have to then pay yourself a salary from your business assets. And this is around 40,000 euros per year, perhaps a little bit more. So that gives you an idea of like what kind of turnover you'd be looking at if you were thinking about setting up a BV. So it's for bigger companies. The biggest advantage of doing it this way is obviously, as I mentioned, because it's a limited company, it's a limited liability company. So your assets aren't at all involved in your business assets. So if you do run up debts with your company, you won't be liable to pay them. Your personal assets are protected. So that's why if you have an investor, if you have a big amount of sort of startup capital, this might be a safer and less like financially risky form for your business to take. To set one up using a notary, you have to bet on around 1,000 euros of legal fees, and the process is just a little bit longer and more complicated. So that's sort of the main difference between the two.
Okay. Thank you for the explanation. And another question is from Ten. He would like to know about registering at the KVK and whether he needs like his own accountant, basically. So again, can Abby and Victoria, you guys help explaining about this, please?
Of course. Well, I mean, Abby's just very thoroughly explained the difference between a BV and an eenmanszaak. So we've kind of established that there are kind of two different sets of rules depending on how you want to go about freelancing in the Netherlands. The same applies for when you're registering with the Chamber of Commerce or the KVK. So if you're running a BV or a BV, then you need to enlist the help of a notary to register with the KVK. But if you're an eenmanszaak, so a sole trader, you can do it entirely by yourself. What's great about the KVK is they have a website that is fully in English, which also includes a lot of tips and information about anyone who's hoping to go freelance or set up a business in the Netherlands. So it's a really great resource for someone who's starting from absolute scratch and doesn't know where to go. What's also great is that because the website is in English, there are forms that you can find in English on the KVK website. So you can start in a language that you can speak instead of having to worry about doing all of it completely in Dutch. The downside is that you do need some Dutch. So even though the forms are in English, the information that you provide in those forms needs to be filled out in Dutch. So text describing your business activities, things like that, you'll need to fill it in Dutch and not in English. So that can be a bit tricky, and it might require you to hire someone to help you, or at least find someone who speaks Dutch and can write Dutch to help you fill out the forms. Once you've filled out all of the forms that you need to fill out to register with the KVK, you can schedule an appointment with them. You can schedule it online. And then you go and you meet them and you bring the form, all of the details about your business and a valid ID. Registration will cost 50 euros. And then you'll receive a number and you'll be registered to do business in the Netherlands. So it's not too complicated, but there are some issues, especially if you're coming in as an international and you're not familiar with the way that it works, or you're not familiar with the Dutch language. So keep that in mind. Coming back to the topic of an accountant, if you want to work with an accountant, it depends on what kind of business you're running and what the form of your business is. So if you're working as a BV, it's, as Abby mentioned, it's more complicated. So unless you have significant experience running your own business and setting up your own business, it's probably recommended to work with an accountant. English-speaking accountants, there are plenty of them in the Netherlands. It's great to find one specifically that is familiar with the Dutch business tax laws so that you avoid any issues. As a sole trader, it's easier to work without an accountant. You can fill out your tax forms without too much difficulty, without the advice of an expert, but it might still be useful in consulting someone, either an accountant or a tax advisor, to make sure that you are making the most out of your business and to perhaps help you save money in other situations where you're not entirely sure what the law is or what the legislation is. And it will also help give you peace of mind to make sure that you're tax compliant. So we have a long list of tax advisors, English speaking and expat friendly tax advisors on the IAMEXPAT website, which you can find. I think there should be a link dropped in the chat.
Yeah.
I used a tax advisor when I was freelancing in the Netherlands. Like, I didn't want to sort out my forms myself, and that made me nervous that I might be doing something wrong. So it was really helpful to just have someone take it over. It's
probably
not
worth
too
saying as
expensive.
well to anyone who's worried about it, like the freelancers that I know that have either Dutch or have lived and worked in the Netherlands for a very long time, they also generally use tax advisors to manage all of those kinds of business and accounting issues, just to make sure that it's a lot less complicated. So
Okay, perfect. So yeah, as mentioned, there is like a bunch of link on the chat box, so feel free to check that out. Yeah. And another question is from Helene from Spain. She would like to know about other supporting companies that you can use to help with freelancing, basically. Should you need like an umbrella company, maybe? Abby, maybe you can help answering this question.
I think it really depends on how experienced you are. Like, maybe you have already worked in a freelance capacity elsewhere in a different country. It's not that different in the Netherlands, but again, the language issue, different tax law, different like business setup laws and stuff. And I like, from personal experience, I know it can feel a bit kind of worrying that you don't want to be doing something wrong or have filled out a form wrong and make a mistake and kind of like potentially end up with like a fine from the tax office. The good news is there is loads of sort of self-help resources out there that you can use if you do want to go at it on your own. I think we're going to post one in the chat that's a really helpful kind of directory on the Netherlands government website that provides articles on literally any topic you could think of about registering your business, doing your taxes and things like that. The tax office itself is slightly less helpful because when they have a law in the Netherlands that you're not able to speak to a tax advisor in English. So as in the Belastingdienst is the tax office. If you contact them for support, they're not allowed to give you advice in English, even though they do speak English, because they, like, legally there might be some issue in the translation, or they might say something that's not correct. So from that sense, if you do feel worried about that, I would also recommend, as we've said, speaking with a tax advisor who is able to speak English and can do that kind of liaising for you. And they can then do all of your communication with the tax office on your behalf. We also have a listing on our IAMEXPAT website, which is a lot of companies who have kind of recognized this need that sometimes people want to set up businesses in the Netherlands but aren't that familiar with the local conditions. And it's called Company Formation, the service that they provide. So depending on how big a package you want to take out, they kind of will take you through from beginning to end of like establishing your company, making sure that your taxes and tax returns are all done, that you're registered with the KVK, that if you employ people, that all of your payroll stuff is done properly and things like that. So in terms of being a freelancer, it's less complicated than establishing, like an enormous limited company. But you might find that gives you peace of mind to work with somebody who's really experienced in this and is able to give you advice in English. Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Thank you for explaining. We also will have a couple of questions regarding this subject matter. First question is about the self-employed visa permit. Can you tell something about that?
Yes. So basically, someone is asking if you can get like a self-employed visa permit somehow. Like, for example, if you're like from outside the Netherlands and then you want to become a freelancer, but you want to like have your own visa permit. I think you did mention that it's like about the 1,000 euros visa that you need to pay for your own, right?
Yeah, so it doesn't. The 1,000 euros is about setting up the BV, and that's the notary cost to get your company established. In terms of applying for the visa, there is a small admin fee, I think of a couple of €100 associated with it. If you're starting completely from scratch from outside the Netherlands and you want to come to the Netherlands purely to freelance, there is a residence permit that you can apply for, which is the self-employed permit. And you have to fulfill like a number of requirements that we mentioned above. And the kind of process of doing that would be that you would first apply for a sort of temporary residence permit, and then once you've been allowed to travel to the Netherlands from inside the Netherlands, you would apply for your more like your full permit that would last for a couple of years. So we can post the information about the self-employed. I think it was already put in the chat about that visa.
Yeah, I think it was mentioned further up, but yeah, it's a specific permit that you apply for to be a freelancer or a self-employed person if you want to come into the Netherlands from outside of the EU.
Mm-hmm. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
I think it does, yeah.
Okay.
Other question we got in our question box was about the insurance for freelancers. I know a little bit about this. There's actually one insurance that I advise you take. It's not even mandatory. It will be mandatory for some companies, but it's around 20 to 30 euros a month, not more. And it's the risk insurance as a freelancer. So that will cover expenses for damages to a company that you will be freelancing at. Some companies have this as mandatory. Most don't, but as a freelancer, I do recommend using this risk insurance. And that's about the only real freelancing insurance that you will need. What do you have one in mind besides that?
No, not really. I think that's pretty enough. And yeah, and maybe Abby and Victoria, do you know any other insurances that mandatory for freelancers?
Yeah, not mandatory, but the only other one that I'd say, because I'm pretty sure it falls under a different category to the risk one, is the income insurance. So that's designed for freelancers who, if they're concerned that something might happen and they might not have a steady income for the course of a full year, basically cases of sickness or injury and you cannot work or you'll suddenly find yourself unemployed, you then can take out income insurance and that will help protect you during those periods of unemployment. The issue is it is quite an expensive cover, and a lot of freelancers, especially if they're operating as a sole trader, they can't afford that coverage. But it's a useful backup to have to ensure that you're protected. I guess also for anyone coming from outside of the Netherlands, they might not know, but you do need to take out health insurance, just like any other person that lives here. That the prices of that have also gone up recently, as have a lot of things, I think, as anyone who lives in the Netherlands will have already realized. So yeah, the prices for the basic health insurance package now starts at about 120 euros a month, and that's mandatory. And pensions, if you're a freelancer, you're responsible for your own pension contribution. If you work in the Netherlands, you are eligible to receive a state pension. But if you want additional money saved up for your retirement, it's probably advisable to look for another source of pension, setting up your own private pension plan. There are two different ways that you can do it. You can either join a collective pension scheme, which I think is known as the Pillar 2 pension, or Pillar 3, which is more popular with freelancers and self-employed people, which is setting up individual pension products. It's basically just making sure you're putting money aside for your own retirement.
Okay. And there's also another questions actually from Ramon. He would like to know about the insurance. Yeah. That's true. And yeah, there's also another question, which is when do you have to move from ZZP to BV basically? When? Is there a specific timing or
No, you can carry on with having a sole trader company as long as it suits you as the business form. You don't at any point have to switch to the BV. That just might be a choice that you would make depending on your turnover and your investors and whether you have shareholders and things like that. But you could reasonably have a freelance business in the Netherlands for 30 years and stay as a sole trader. You don't need to upgrade.
Okay.
Or upgrade. I don't know if that's the right word. I was a sole trader the whole time, so yeah.
I think BV is more mandatory when you will have other people as well.
Exactly.
I have seen that. I have freelancers who have BV, but they also have other freelancers within their company. So then it quite quickly becomes BV, of course. Otherwise, that's not needed. We've also had a question about freelancing in the Netherlands with a highly skilled migrant visa. Are you allowed to freelance in the Netherlands with this type of visa? Abby, can you answer this question for us, please?
Yeah, so I double checked the IND website for this because I wanted to be really sure, and they say really explicitly that with a highly skilled migrant visa, you are allowed to do self-employed work on the side, like in general, yes. What happens though is when you are issued with a visa, it will have its own condition. When you're issued with a residence permit, it will have its own conditions on the back of it, or within the document somewhere, you will find some text relating to whether you're allowed to work. And almost always with the highly skilled migrant visa, it will say something like work allowed as a highly skilled migrant and as a self-employed person. Other work needs to be done with a work permit. So what this means is that you're obviously allowed to do your work as a highly skilled migrant, which is the position that gave you the residence permit in the first place. You probably had sponsorship for this from your employer. You're also allowed to do self-employed work on the side, and depending on what the other job you wanted to do was, you would have to get a permit for that. So you're allowed to do self-employment on the side as long as it states so on your residence permit. You're not allowed to become fully self-employed with this type of permit, as because I've mentioned, your highly skilled migrant visa is based on your working status for the company that you work at. So if you switch to self-employment, you're moving positions, and that would sort of negate the grounds for which you were given your residence permit originally. Again, I think you should also check with your employer to make sure that they're happy with it, especially if they're your sponsor, because you don't want to run into any issues that way. But if in doubt, check your residence permit and it will be very explicit about it.
Okay.
Thanks. We have also had a lot of questions around the possibility of a sponsorship from businesses in the Netherlands. Yes, well, not all companies are registered as sponsors. So you, like Darwin is a registered company for this. There's a complete list of these companies that you can actually find on the IND website. We'll share the link in the chat box, and then you can check which companies do have a sponsorship. Do always check this when you talk with companies from the Netherlands, because there are companies out there who don't have a sponsorship, and then you'll get very far into the hiring process and then suddenly find out that they're not able to hire you. I've had it happen with people in the past who were working with these companies, and then they got stuck in the end because it took way more time than expected. There are also companies, by the way, that use payrolling companies, so that have a second company in between, who take care of the visas or the visas. We sometimes do that as well, not in the Netherlands per se, but we have set up companies like these for places like Dublin, for example.
Yep, that's true. So that's correct. Okay, so and then let's move on to the next topic, which is, so basically we can talk a little bit more about like taxes related. So the first question, which is from Michelle from Singapore, and she's currently working at a Dutch company as a business analyst already, and she would like to know the best way to handle taxes as a freelancer in the Netherlands. So we also have the same question actually from Mikal from Poland. So Victoria, maybe you can explain to us a little bit about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've already mentioned taxes have come up quite a lot so far in this webinar. I don't want to scare people, but obviously it's quite an important aspect when you're moving to a new country, especially if you're wanting to set up yourself as a freelancer, set up your own business. So definitely an important topic to cover. We've mentioned one, but so there are two main forms of tax as a freelancer that you're liable to pay. Obviously, one is income tax, like your standard employed person. But on top of that, you'll also have to pay VAT, which in Dutch is called BTW or BTW. BTW always sounds weird to me as an acronym. It doesn't quite sound very official.
BTW, yeah.
Yeah, BTW always sounds better. So income tax, as I think we've mentioned about previously, is it's calculated via an annual income tax return that you have to file in exactly the same way that you file if you were a regular employee at a company. And as a freelancer, you can also deduct expenses via this tax return. You do this on your own online. It's pretty easy, although the tax return is in Dutch. As well, as we've mentioned, you might want to consult an expert because as a freelancer, obviously you have additional expenses or perhaps other aspects that you are legally liable to include in your tax return. But if you don't speak Dutch or you're unfamiliar with the tax system, it's best to make sure that you're tax compliant and consult someone who knows exactly what they're doing and how it all works. So it also can help you maximize your savings and ensure that you're not paying tax unnecessarily, which I don't think anybody wants to do. So they ensure that if you're eligible for any deductions or anything, they'll make sure that you're receiving those on your tax returns. So another one that is obviously very important, VAT, BTW, you pay to the Belastingdienst, the Dutch tax office, every quarter. And it means that as a freelancer, I think it's the same for pretty much all industries. You charge an additional 21% VAT on top of your regular fee. And then you set that money aside, as we've mentioned, in a business account as opposed to a personal account. And you pay it to the tax office every quarter, so every 3 months. And you deduct that VAT, BTW, from your business-related expenses. It's a lot. It's a lot of admin, and it's a lot of filing and money and all of this kind of stuff. So it can get quite complicated. What the Dutch government has done to make it easier for sole traders and small companies is that if you collect less than 1,883 euros in VAT every year, you don't have to pay it back to the tax office. So that's quite a big plus. Some other services, so some industries, VAT free. So if you're working in journalism or in education, then you're not liable to pay VAT. Another thing that's worth keeping in mind is that if you are based in the Netherlands, but you're invoicing clients who are outside of the Netherlands, but I think it only applies to companies that are in the EU, there's this system called a reverse charge VAT. So it could mean that you're exempt from charging and therefore paying VAT if you're working with clients outside of the Netherlands. So also something worth keeping in mind.
Okay, perfect. So next question, which is from Yildiz. Yildiz would like to know the cost of freelancing. So for example, like the annual fees. So any of you guys can help us with that?
Yeah, I mean, there's no kind of set annual fee to be a freelancer. You don't have to pay like a kind of monthly contribution or whatever, but there's some expenses that we've already mentioned, but we can just sum them up here. So you have to take into account the cost of registering with the KK. Sorry, I keep doing my like non-Dutch abbreviations, like you're saying it really fancyly. I'm like KVK, BTW. With the KVK. Yeah, Kamer van Koophandel. There we are.
Perfect.
Thank you. Which is about 50 euros, the one-off. Though obviously, if you're registering a BV, as we mentioned, it's a bit more of like around 1,000 euros in notary fees. You may want to employ an accountant or a tax advisor for like doing like a one-off filing, like asking them to fill out your tax return each year is somewhere around 150 to 250 euros once per year. You'll have to think about the cost of hiring an office space, or if you're working from home, whether that will add money onto your like internet bill or your utilities. You'll be using more electricity, obviously. You have to think about your taxes, so paying income tax and VAT, although VAT obviously isn't really an expense for you because you collect it and then pass it on to somebody else. And then any other business expenses that might come up as part of, depending on what you're doing, whether you need equipment or printing costs or like products and things like that. So there's definitely a few payments to keep in consideration, but there's no kind of set annual fee that you have to pay to be a freelancer.
Okay. We still have a few more questions regarding this. So Julia from Amersfoort would like to understand the rules around bookkeeping and records as a freelancer in the Netherlands. So what is required actually?
Well, yeah, this is obviously something you want to do right, and you don't want to risk making any mistakes. So something that's important about as keeping your books and keeping your records in order. As we've mentioned previously, it's generally required that freelancers working in the Netherlands have contracts with their clients that define their working relationship. So that's also something that you want to keep on file, and that's something you want to keep recorded and make sure that you have to hand in case anything happens. So first point, a slight tangent, but also relevant, I think, in this topic. Moving on to actual bookkeeping, as a freelancer, you are required by law to keep accounting records, which I don't think anyone would be surprised by. It means that the Dutch tax authorities can check your accounts and make sure that you aren't doing anything untoward. But you're not required as a freelancer to conform to any set style of bookkeeping. So I guess there's a little bit of freedom in there if you have a way that you want to do things, that you're not required to change it up to conform to a specific standard. But what is worth noting is that under the Dutch law, you are required to keep your business records for at least 7 years. There's a retention period of 7 years. I think it goes up for 10 years, up to 10 years for property. So that's also something worth keeping in mind depending on what kind of business you're operating in. And again, I feel like a bit of a broken record, but you probably or perhaps might want to consider employing a bookkeeper to make sure that your records are done correctly and everything is done properly and in line with how it should be. I feel like everything I say is like, you might want to consult a professional. I'm not just saying this to make you pay more money for things. This is genuine advice that a lot of people do stick to because it can be complicated and you don't want to risk doing anything wrong. If you don't want to necessarily hire an accountant, you may have to if you are running a larger business. So if you have assets and turnover in the millions and are employing more than 50 people, then you will legally have to hire an accountant to manage your books. And finally, also slightly different, but as a freelancer, you are responsible for a record of the hours that you work, which is very, very important, as I think anyone who has an experience freelancing knows when you're calculating your income tax return and defining which tax breaks you might be eligible for as a freelancer. So I think that's everything.
Okay. And another one is Effie. From Amstelveen would like to know how to combine tax with another job. What sort of invoice should we use? Maybe Abby can
Yeah, I can do this one. So in terms of taxes, I think we talked about this earlier, the way that you will report your income if you're both freelancing and working as a job, so in employment, is the same. You'll still use your kind of standard annual tax return. It will ask you whether you made any income from employment and if you made any income from self-employment. And then we'll combine all of this together, apply the appropriate deductions to each side, and then present you with your tax bill for the year. So that's how you would combine self-employment and employment income in your tax return. Again, I'm going to repeat it too, Victoria. I think that if in this kind of situation, it's definitely worth hiring, or you don't necessarily have to hire like an accountant, but there's lots of sort of online software as well that can kind of help you with that sort of thing, because the deductions on both sides that you might not be aware of in terms of like business expenses and office spaces, there's definitely some rules if like you're working from home, which now a lot of people do, that you can deduct a part of your rent or potentially part of your utilities from your taxes and things like that, but the limits change every year. So that's really helpful to work with an accountant or just some sort of tax preparation software to do that. In terms of invoicing, there's no guidelines or rules in the Netherlands about the type of invoicing you have to issue. Generally speaking, obviously, it should always contain like, important details about your business and the addressee, have a date on it, and have an invoice number is usually useful, and things like your VAT and stuff. But you don't have to. You can find like numerous invoice templates online, and it does anyone like that will do. It doesn't have to look in a specific way in the Netherlands, as long as you're keeping good records. Just have a fabulous spreadsheet and make sure it's up to date is my big advice, because it does get complicated quite quickly.
Okay. Actually, that brings us to the next question, which has been asked by James from Brussels. So, as well as, of course, like a number of people. So what are the possibilities around freelancing in the Netherlands while also having a full-time job? Like, do you have to pay additional monthly fees regarding of revenue, maybe?
I think we've kind of touched on this topic a little bit already, so I'll try to keep my answer relatively short. As we've mentioned, you need to make sure that you have the right residence permit if you're coming from outside of the EU, to make sure that you're allowed to work as a freelancer and undertake self-employed work at the same time as your regular job. So whether you're coming in as a highly skilled migrant or whatever, make sure that you are actually legally entitled to work as a freelancer. If your employer is your sponsor to get into the Netherlands, and generally, even if they're not, it's probably a good idea to discuss, as Abby mentioned, any work that you want to take on. Some contracts in the Netherlands do explicitly state that you need the permission of your employer if you want to take on any external work. And there could also potentially be some non-compete clauses in your contract. So it's all just to keep things above board and make sure there's no bad blood. It's always probably best to discuss it with your employer if you're planning to work on the side. I don't really remember where I was going with this point. Oh, fees. Yes. As we've mentioned, there are no like standard monthly or annual fees that you need to pay to operate as a freelancer. So as have been listed, the standard fees that you need to keep in mind if you're willing or if you're planning to do some self-employed work, those are things that you'll need to take in mind if you've also got a full-time job. You'll have to pay taxes. You'll have to make sure your income from your self-employed and your freelance work is listed on your tax return as well, but there's no short answer, no.
Okay.
We got a couple of questions about these subjects. We
Extra.
also got questions from previous subjects, so we can see if we can tackle that. One of the questions is from Mark Gardner. He asks, if we were to go to the Netherlands as a freelancer, will it require a new visa if we took a job as a regular employee and quit freelancing? Will that affect residency, including for family? Well, it largely depends, of course, where you come from. If it's from the European Union, there will be no issue whatsoever. If you're working here as a freelancer from internationally, that will definitely change a lot. But truth be told, to also answer another question, it's quite difficult without agreement to go freelancing in the Netherlands. Because if you are a highly skilled migrant, you're here on a highly skilled migrant visa that's been hired by a company already. So I think that answers the question. There's also a question about, does it answer the question actually? Or does anyone else have another opinion on this matter?
No, I think you covered it. Like if you're switching from one type of employment to another one, that will affect your residency status because that's what your residence permit is based on. So you need to like essentially reapply if you leave your job the same way as if you lost your job, your residency potentially would be in jeopardy because it's linked.
Yeah, the only thing I'm wondering if he's planning then to go to freelancing in the Netherlands, where I'm from, and then if he's going for a highly skilled migrant visa, that will actually be a more steady path to residence from upward situation, away from the EU. There's another question about Becky has a highly skilled migrant visa, but her partner is the sponsor. If it changes anything, well, if you have a sponsor, it's definitely a sponsorship, a partner sponsorship. So
It's
like
like
a
a
partner
dependent
visa. Yeah, it's not a highly skilled migrant visa. Then, if you can be a freelancer, well, yeah, I think so, because the proof of residency is with a highly skilled migrant who's already living there.
Yeah, because I think it works the same as like highly skilled migrant visa.
I think, but let's prove no matter. We need to get questions clear. But I think what's going on. So you have a highly skilled migrant who lives here, or you have someone in the Netherlands who lives here, and you're the partner of said person. So that means that the proof of residency lies with your partner, and then indeed you will be able to go freelancing in the Netherlands.
It should state explicitly on the residence permit itself whether she's allowed to do self-employed work.
Yeah. As far as I know, it would work the same as if you're on a partner visa and you're here sponsored because of your partner, but then you got a job, not self-employed, but you got a job. It would work the same. You're in the country on a certain visa. As long as that visa gives you permission to work, then you're fine, regardless of what kind of employment you're going into.
All right. And what are all the questions? Let's go to the next one.
Let's talk about jobs and salary, actually.
The next section indeed is all about jobs, and me and Vanya will tackle all these questions. Because Duasi from America would like to understand what the freelancing market is like in the Netherlands at the moment. Well, we did some studies about it. Of course, we work as recruits in the freelancing business full time. If you can take that around in the Netherlands, 17 to 8 million people live. 1/17 of this, so 1/10 of these people are freelancing. And then we're not even counting people who, of course, are not working. So that leaves, let's say, around 10 to 12 million of the working population more than 10% of that is freelancing. Some of them are part-time, some of them are full-time, but that means that the freelancing business in the Netherlands is actually very booming.
Very booming, yeah.
So it is not a rare sight to be able to have freelancing within your own network as well.
True. And also, like Chris in Greece, he would also like to understand about the opportunities for junior and media level tech professionals. And also, Shrikant from The Hague would like to understand about freelance leadership opportunities. So maybe I can answer about the junior media, and then you can answer about the leadership. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So regarding junior and mid-level tech professional, so basically as a freelancer, the companies expect you to hit the ground running from the day one, basically. So that's why usually people who works as a freelancers are already like mid to senior up. So if I would say that if you're a junior and media level, then there are more opportunities to become like in terms of permanent employment, because they give a lot of possibilities for trainings, and yeah, basically like then the companies also want to increase their headcount. So that's what I think.
I agree. Just from my experience, usually freelancing profiles, especially in the IT sector, are very focused on senior roles. The reason for that being a junior media is more like an investment of a company for looking at the long term. Freelancing is usually more short term. So a company wants extra hands, and they need an experienced extra hand. For that reason, there are more jobs open for senior level freelancers than there are junior medias. It does happen, especially the media ones. I've never had a junior freelancer role in my career as a recruiter, but it does happen for the media. But yeah, senior is
usually more senior,
where it
senior
goes,
people. And I think that's also related to like the leadership opportunities,
yeah, correct.
right?
Because there was another question, well, another subtext about this, the lead roles. There are some lead roles available as freelancers, definitely, but usually in companies that I see, most leads are at that point, permanent employees. But there's, let's say, the senior level is the most popular one. If you're looking at the more statistics, so you have the junior, you have the media, you have the senior and the lead. I feel like senior lead is the most asked-for role within the freelancing business. After that, it's the lead, and then after it's the media, and after it's the junior. Lead roles are also an investment in a company. We know a company really well, but that is not a website to have. I think that is that answers those questions.
Yeah.
Anja would like to know whether freelancing in the Netherlands without speaking fluent Dutch is feasible. And Ayit would like to understand how to find English-speaking tech roles. Well, I can cover this one, or will you want to cover?
Yeah, we can both cover. So basically, maybe we can answer the first question
You're
first.
English-speaking in the Netherlands, so
yeah.
I think you're a perfect subject matter.
Because I'm also an expat. I'm from Indonesia. So anyway, so as you know, Netherlands is like a very international country, right? Like I feel like almost everyone, well, not everyone probably, but like a lot of people speaks fluent English. Like whenever you go, people speak fluent English. And most we have a lot of like companies from other countries, but we also Dutch company, and most of them actually have international work environment. So there are plenty of freelance opportunity, which is like an English opportunities that doesn't require like Dutch speaking skills, basically. But what I think is beneficial, because you're living here and you want to work here, so it is always a big plus point if you actually like be able to communicate in Dutch. Because I know that some companies have like a specific full Dutch team. So when you also speak English and Dutch, the possibility of you to get a job is like
I
kind of
think
better.
if you are able to speak Dutch in the Netherlands, your chances to get different roles will up around 35%. I advise this to some freelancers who've been working here for quite some time. They want to upgrade their CV. Sometimes say, well, if you're taking Dutch course, they will upgrade it for 35% around that range. But there's still plenty of jobs available in the Netherlands that hire in completely English. That you'll be fine.
Yep.
So I guess, I agree.
Yeah, English speaking a lot, but it of course maximizes your chances to find a job when you can communicate a little bit in Dutch.
Yeah, let's start with English. There will be enough.
But it's
there will be
completely
enough
fine.
to go around.
Yeah.
Then we have a question about the EU passport. I don't think so.
EU passport, yeah. It's from Yit. Also, like how to find English-speaking tech roles. Is there any specific in that?
Well, if a job vacancy is in complete English and it's based in the Netherlands, and it doesn't say that it doesn't say Dutch mandatory, you can usually assume that it's not mandatory to speak Dutch. So we're very specific with that. If I'm not looking for Dutch speaker, I will definitely make my vacancy in English. And I can say that Dutch is preferred, for example. But if it's mandatory, there's no reason for me to put in an English job job vacancy because I'm looking for Dutch speakers. So English CVs are usually just the way to go, and I figured that's probably already where you're looking at. So there you go.
Yeah. Yeah, we also have another questions actually from Usman from Berlin and Marcin from Poland and Ade from Indonesia. Hi. They would like to know like whether it's possible to secure a remote freelancing tech job in the Netherlands.
It was easier during COVID. It's of course a very popular proposition. I do have on personal level. I have a few people who do that. I know within our company we have quite a few as well, but it's become less popular within companies. So usually what we see is hybrid is the way to go. So 1 or 2 days working at the office and the rest of the week just remote working. So it does happen. It's just more rare nowadays. And now COVID is finally over. So yeah, you can always give it a shot. There are some companies that are open to it. It's just a more rare thing.
Yeah, and I think it's also like easier if you already like based in the Netherlands, right?
Yeah.
And then you start working, and then you get to know your team and everything, and then after a few months, maybe you want to like travel.
I advise that as well. That's usually when there's also an issue about trust and knowing your company, of course, and you need to get started. Also, as a freelancer within a new company. After if you've worked there for a couple of months, usually the people are a little bit more lax in the situation. There are situations that you can have a chat with your lead. It also depends on management, of course, and ask to be able to work remotely for a couple of months, but rarely start there.
Yeah.
Start with a hybrid.
Yeah, just get to know them, and then usually they're very flexible with this.
Yeah.
Okay. And actually, we're at the last section, which is around networking. So Danielle, who is already in Amsterdam, would like to understand how to network within the freelance community in the Netherlands. And Gianni from Albania would like to know how to network to enhance his career, basically. So I think you know like a bit about this, right?
Networking in the Netherlands. Well, I think this professional, not social. So networking in the Netherlands, LinkedIn, of course, is the way to go. You can put search engine in your search bar as well. In regards to finding Dutch-based people with or your same skill sets, or of course consultants or recruiters who are actually looking for experts in your range. Like that is possible. I think LinkedIn will be the best case to be able to use to enhance your network as an English-speaking person. Or do you have any other advice to really upgrade your role? I think you can also just put status updates on your LinkedIn that you're looking for people in the Netherlands to have connections with.
Yeah, probably. But I think Victoria and Abby also, do you guys have like some ideas about this?
Well, I think there's basic things as well. LinkedIn is a big thing, but from a social and professional aspect, I think a lot of people would say that a lot of professional opportunities come from who you know. So actually meeting people in a social setting can be really, really helpful for your career. So joining clubs, language courses, all of these kinds of things can just grow your network and enhance your opportunity for new work. I think there are also like professional courses and things that you can join, whether it's things like public speaking classes and things like that to grow your professional skills while also meeting new people. So you kind of get a best of both worlds. LinkedIn. And then, as Abby mentioned at the top of this lovely webinar, IAMEXPAT very proudly host fairs twice a year in Amsterdam and The Hague.
So it's like we have a full day event. We're going to be in Amsterdam on April 22nd, so just towards the end of next month. It's on a Saturday, so no one has an excuse not to come. It's like a really fun day. It will be we have a mixture of stands with lots of expat focused businesses. There will be recruiters, covering all kind of topics, as well as healthcare things, childcare, education, MBA programs, things like that. But in terms of networking, it's attended by thousands of different expats, and lots of people are looking to network and meet new people. There are some social areas and not webinars, workshops that you can attend and meet people. So it's a really good opportunity if you are based in the Netherlands to meet some other expats who are also looking to connect and potentially share some opportunities together. So we would love to see you there. Victoria and I will both be there. So
we will be there. You'll be able to see us in the flesh. We're not just bobbing heads. There's more.
Perfect. And actually, we have a few more questions. Also, can you maybe read some of them? Maybe try this one.
This question is from Alberto, that recruiters in general have a bad name in the Netherlands. Some charge too much, for example. Can you say something about that and how to tell the good ones apart? I think transparency is very important when you're speaking to candidates or professionals. So if you feel like the recruiter is holding a lot of his cards to or close on the table, so to speak, I think that's an English saying, that is usually a reason for concern. Also, try to see if the recruiter, the appointments he makes with you, or if he holds to those promises. Generally, I just like to mention a company name as quick as I can. This is just on me, but I feel like if there's no trust for me to the candidate, there should be no trust in return. Transparency can come about a lot of things. The only thing I don't understand is the charging too much, because usually what we do is we actually ask what the candidate wants in that range as well. And in regards to, if you're talking about margins, I am open about my margins when candidates ask about this, but it's not like we're charging the candidates for our services. We're charging the clients for our services.
So usually what the candidates are asking, we're gonna try our best to get that number for them, basically, right?
That is the case. And if that's not possible, I will usually just mention and be transparent about the margins as well. So, but you do have recruiters who are more like the cowboy behaviors, or recruiters indeed who you have a chat with and suddenly you laying on desk of 50 different companies that you know nothing about, if you've never spoken or never agreed to these. But generally see if they are very open honest with you, if they actually mention which companies they are going to introduce you, if they're not too vague, beating around the bush, and if you hear from them when you've made an appointment.
True. It's always good whenever your recruiters basically give you feedback. Sometimes it might take longer to get feedbacks from the client, but at least usually what I do is I will keep them updated every few days to know, so they know. So basically, so candidates know that, okay, there are some delay, but my recruiter is still updating me, basically.
Understanding that the candidate side is more stressful than the recruitment side, because you're actually waiting for a new job. Well, that's the thing how I look at it. We deal with this every day, but for a candidate, this is a very big deal, of course. It's a new job, it's a life decision. So while you're soaking around waiting for that response, we should give you feedback. Even if there's no new news, it's still an update.
True. So maybe we can also answer a few more, from Hina. Can we work as freelancer for a Netherlands-based company from another European country while being a resident in another European country? So I think I have a few.
I think I have one as well.
But From what I know, it's supposed to be from European.
It is quite a
countries.
puzzle how it's put now. For a Netherlands-based company from another European country, so it's European Union, I presume, because that's the more important
European
thing.
Union, that's true.
While being a resident in another European country.
So basically, like for example, if they're a freelancer in Spain, a registered freelancer in Spain, can they work with like a Dutch company? Or like a Dutch base? I think they can. They can because as long as you're like in the European Union, then everything works the same.
Yeah, there are a couple of, we have not mentioned it, but that might be interesting as well. Besides the European Union being able to freelance, it's also possible, it's quite different, but it's also possible to freelance from the United States or Japan to come here as a freelancer. It's a trade agreement that we have made with those two companies, or those two countries. Because we forgot to mention it earlier when we found out. So that's important to tackle. But well, your question, it's possible.
Yep.
No big deal.
Yeah.
Right.
I would say in this case, definitely get a tax advisor. Just to make
Yes,
sure
that was
that
the
you're
one thing I was
avoiding-
gonna say.
that is an important one, of course.
It's complicated because of like your tax residency might affect where you pay income tax, and to make sure that you're not. I would just get a tax advisor because it's complicated. And
Yeah. Okay.
Let's see if we can ask for one more. What do we have?
Let me see.
Can we go a little bit down?
Maybe this one. I think this also related to like the networking that Abby and Victoria already mentioned. But there's like also another question from Mark Gardner. So he asked any other advice in terms of networking when you are not currently in the Netherlands. So for example, because the fair, the meetups that you guys have with IAMEXPAT is like face-to-face, right?
Yeah.
So what if he's not in the Netherlands? So he cannot come, but maybe you guys have like also a webinar or like a meetups online.
Yeah.
Probably.
So we run webinars throughout the year. Probably like every couple of weeks we'll have a webinar going on, and similar we have the chat section and things like that. I think there's a lot of online resources in like Facebook groups of like entrepreneurs or like business related people in different countries. Meetup is a great resource as well, which is another place where you can find kind of like stuff going on. I think since the coronavirus pandemic, it's been much more common for people to do these kind of things like remotely as well. So I'm sure that there are opportunities out there. I don't know, did you have something to add to that, Victoria?
Yeah, no, Darwin also hosts regular webinars.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'll do the plug for you guys as well. But yeah, I think kind of as Abby said, there's always, I think social media is the real plus here. And I know it might be a bane of the existence for many, but it is a great platform for meeting people and connecting with people and trying to build up a network if you aren't physically present or are not yet physically present.
Like you could get like expat Facebook groups, don't you?
Yeah.
And you often see people posting like, haven't moved here yet, but looking to connect with XYZ kind of people, and people are very responsive and up for that kind of thing. So
or groups for like specific nationalities in the Netherlands or specific kinds of work and stuff. So yeah,
that's true. Oh yeah, and that's true. Darwin also like sometimes have like online meetup, online seminars. So the nearest one, I think we have like data related. We also have like AI woman in tech. So usually it's a good way also to, if you join, and then you can meet like not just freelancers but also like other IT people basically. So just keep like just keep looking into our website, Darwin and IAMEXPAT website. You will see for sure. And do you want to ask one more? Maybe just like
the last one, it's very specific. So the last question we got was from let's see, what's his name? Ahmed Watka. Which technology firms are inclined to develop their business tools web application? Does not name. Yeah. Your question is very specific, so I will have this question with people one-on-one. But there are a lot of companies regarding the .NET Core full stack engineer, because your technical skill looks impressive, but that is not a question that I'm able to answer very quickly. That will be a conversation of 30 minutes that I can go on. So I'm sorry to have to skip that question.
Yeah. And yeah, so basically, if you want to work in the Netherlands, as we mentioned before, that it will be a little bit harder if you are like outside EU and you want to work fully remote. So it would be best if try to like live here and then find a job, which is like actually better, and find a company that can help you with relocation for sure, basically.
So you can look for the bigger companies. Of course, you can put a search in .NET, like see which companies hire a lot of profiles in .NET. You can even check this on LinkedIn, look where they have a lot of English-speaking employees who have .NET tool stacks. Those are possibilities, but going in specifics which companies, that's going to be a list of hundreds. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so well, we already go pretty long now. So I'm pretty sure if there's any other answers that we cannot, any other questions that we cannot answer for now, we will try to answer it later on. And also, we want to let you guys know that there will be like a web page built following this event. Also, like with all the event contents and then the question that maybe haven't been answered, and also like all the useful links that have been added to the chat. So check that out, and also keep a lookout basically for our future freelancing events. Like we will also cover freelancing in Germany and also Switzerland, and all of them will be partnering with IAMEXPAT, of course. So yeah, so check it out. And so basically it is. And thank you so much, Victoria. Do you guys also have like any last word?
Josh, thank you for joining us, for your great questions.
Thank you, and hope to see you at the fair.
No, but thank you, everyone, and see you next time then.
Next time.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.